Hi there, and welcome to the 4th episode of the Vintage Cyclist. This episode is sponsored by nobody, because I don't do sponsorships, and nobody is willing to sponsor me. Alright, everybody in their seats? Yep, alright, let's get this show going.
This leader is provided to permit the projectionist to complete adjustment of focus and sound level before the film begins.
In 1967, the Toronto Maple Leafs won their last Stanley Cup. Guys and Dolls was in theaters, and the Beatles were probably still the most popular band in the world. The Vietnam War still continued overseas, and Canada celebrated its centennial anniversary with the amazing Expo 67 in Montreal. But more importantly, in the west end of a city called Toronto, in a large factory under the name of the Canadian Cycle and Motor Company, a small green machine pulled off the assembly line. The brand new 1967 model of the CCM Elan. Elegant, fast, stylish, more than just a bicycle. This 3-speed beauty is the perfect selection for any Canadian looking for an enjoyable ride. It's a portable fashion statement. With you upon its seat, you'll be the talk of the town. Look at it. Just like any bicycle, this one needed an owner, and it soon received one. A man, not a silhouetted one like this one, a normal average guy as far as I know. Now, this man bought the bike and took it home, and he adored it. He rode it every day actively for about a year, enjoying every minute of it. But for one reason or another, at some point in 1968 he put it in his garage, and never rode it again. And that would have been the end of the story of this bike, were it not for something short of a miracle. Just over half a century later, in the far futuristic year of 2020, the man's son stumbled upon the bike in his father's garage, still sitting in the place where it had been for the last 52 years, sealed away, rusting, and decaying, forgotten. He himself had no interest in bicycles, and since his father was no longer around to reclaim it, he sought out an old friend of his dad's. The son gifted the bike to him, and though the old man's cycling days had long since been over, his passion still remained, in the form of restoring bicycles from years gone by, back to their former glory. And though he was eager to fix up the old two-wheeler, work piled up, as it often does, and he was forced to put the project aside in order to finish other ones, chipping away at some of the work when he could, but ultimately he ended up abandoning the project. After a few months, he decided to put it up for sale on the internet. It's now January 2021, and I'm browsing Kijiji, looking for a way to squander away my Christmas money like usual. And that's when I spotted it. Vintage CCM Elan, $80. I was ecstatic. What a beautiful bike. And only $80 too. I couldn't believe it. How could someone price something so low? The bike appeared to be in fine shape, just a little rust and some dings on the fenders. I contacted the man to arrange a meeting, and I called the aid of my father and went with him to take a look at the bicycle. Upon arrival, the old man led us to his basement, where we saw about half a dozen bicycles in various states of disrepair. We had a lovely chat with the old man about the CCM and its history, along with all the other projects he had going on. And my dad then asked him something along the lines of, "Well, how well does the bike ride?" To which the old man responded, "Why don't you take it for a ride?" To which my dad responded, "All right, we'll bring it upstairs." And the man replied, "Oh, you can take it for a spin right here if you want." My father looked excited, almost giddy, and instantly accepted the offer, and proceeded to take the bike around for a few laps in the basement. I followed suit and also took the bike for a test ride. The bike rode perfectly, like it was brand new. I paid the man and thanked him, and me and my dad took it outside for a proper test ride up and down the street, a test that it passed with flying colors. It was then that the project became mine. I was eager to pick up the restoration where he had left off, so much so that I began the process that very night, derusting, cleaning, polishing, adjusting seat heights, and putting air in the tires. Well, that was about all the things I had to do, really. I completed the restoration late that night and gave it another test ride in the parking lot. It's from here on out that the bike became my daily rider. I rode it all the time, and I enjoyed every minute of it. As time went on and my riding became more consistent, I began to slowly modify the bike, changing it several times to match my ever-changing needs and riding style. I first added a pair of 1970s drop bars, then removed the internal 3-speed gear changer, effectively making the bike single speed. I added a larger, thinner front wheel, changed the seat since the original one fell apart. But then a change occurred, one that I did not expect. I installed a fixed gear wheel. I had tried fixed gear once before, using my father's bike, and I hadn't previously enjoyed it. But my MacGyver-esque solutions to the problems caused by removing the internal shifter were failing rapidly, and I had no other choice, as this was the only spare wheel that was available. In the process of putting the wheel on, I removed the back fender and it never returned to the bike. I do still have it, but it's never since been mounted back onto the bike. Installing the fixed gear wheel was an important change, since the gear ratio was significantly more aggressive than before. My legs got stronger the more I rode, and I became faster and fitter as time went on. This all culminated into the peak of this bike's career, 2 separate trips I made in the summer of 2021. The first was a venture I made on May 6th, from London, Ontario to St. Thomas, Ontario, a 29.1 kilometer one-way solo trip that took me roughly an hour and 55 minutes to complete. It was the first serious bike ride I had done, and I went there for one purpose, to pick up a pair of vintage cycling goggles off of Kijiji. I didn't have a car and I didn't feel like waiting for my dad to take me after work, so bicycle was the only way for me to get there. He later picked me up and gave me a ride for the way back. On May 16th, I made another trip, this time accompanied by my father, a 38-kilometer one-way trip from London to Port Stanley that took about 2 hours to complete. Once there, I spent the afternoon on a beach near the port. My dad rode back to get the truck, as I was unable to make the return trip, since I had never done a ride of that magnitude before. In the aftermath of those 2 trips, the 15-year-old fixed gear wheel that my dad had already rode several thousand kilometers on wasn't looking too good. The rim was beginning to split and fall apart. So me and my dad sent the wheel to be repaired at our usual bike shop, Spokes and Sprockets in London, Ontario. In the meantime, I reinstalled the original wheel for about a month or so, which also then began to deteriorate quite quickly as a result of my earlier modifications. It got to a point where I was no longer able to trust the wheel's structural integrity and was forced to hang up the bike until the fixed gear wheel was rebuilt. The bike then laid there, untouched from July until August 10th, when the wheel was returned to me. The rim was mostly identical to the original with the exception of the color, which was now silver rather than black. At the time, I had finally grown tired of the drop bars that I had installed, so I decided to swap them for the cruiser bars that had previously been on my 1982 Velosport Michi. I kept the bars as they were for another month, before deciding to invert them later in September. On August 12th, I took the bike back to its hometown for the first time in 54 years, and rode it around downtown Toronto in the waterfront area for a day-long photography excursion. The CCM handled the inner city wonderfully and was fast enough to keep up with the various courier bikes I encountered during the day. September of this year was when I retired the Velosport Michi after 39 years of service. I took various parts from it, including its brakes, which then made their way onto this bike. By the time October rolled around, the CCM sat unused since September 17th and would continue to do so until October 8th, when I decided to reinstall the drop bars once again. On October 11th, I decided to address some of the issues that had arisen over the last few months. The most glaring of which was the steering had become atrocious. It was overly sensitive and had an extremely wide turning radius, which made it an insufferable riding experience. The steering had been just fine when I last rode it during the summer months. Try as I did, I was unable to solve any of the problems, and the bike remained as it was. On October 13th, I decided to reassess the issues that the bike had. I noticed that the tires were at an incredibly low pressure, and since the tires that were on the bike were high-pressure Presta tires, I figured that may have had an impact on the steering, which then I decided to correct that. By pumping up the tires to 100 psi, I noticed that the steering was improved at least by 65%.
Hi there, welcome to the Bike Institute. As of right now, this is where bicycles were invented. And this in fact is a 1967 CCM Elan. I've owned this bike for just under a year, and as you can tell, I've heavily modified it. It's an important bike to me, mainly because it's the bike I started seriously cycling on. And actually, it's also the bike in the channel's banner, so that's neat, I guess. Anyway, let's get on to the demonstration, shall we? bike, which I guess it's kind of hard to demonstrate, unless it were difficult for me to lift it. For me, it's not that bad, but for my brother and assistant, Samhar.
Hey there.
Come on, lift this. It's significantly harder for him. That's just because he's smaller.
Yeah.
But he can do it. So,
That's very hard.
that means this is clearly a bike worth buying. If somebody can lift it, no reason not to buy it.
And thanks to its unique one-wheel drivetrain system, it makes for an exceptional all-terrain vehicle. It has no limitations. Anywhere you go, it'll go. Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for watching. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Shall we? Don't follow it.
You're supposed to turn off the video when you did that.
Hi there. Welcome to the Bike Institute. As of now, this is the place where bicycles were invented. You can't fact check that. Don't bother. You won't get any results. I'm the most reputable source of information in the world, so don't worry about it.
A forest boy!